And now we've got to see if anybody can hear me or not. I'm not really sure what happened last time, but hopefully people will show up. Oh boy. That's one of those days. So, Rational Bushcraft claims he can hear me. ZKR99 says, woohoo. Gordon861 says, with sound. Andrew Allen says, well, hello, Steve. Loud and clear, Joshua. You know, I'll be honest with you. I don't know. I don't know what to tell you because I didn't do anything. I'd never do anything. I used this rig twice today, 3 times yesterday. It's the 3rd time today. And I literally do the exact same thing every single time. Press 3 buttons. Don't touch the mic. Don't touch anything, and it happens. So the reason it took so long for me to get back on right now was that I was concerned that maybe the microphone wasn't hooked up. So I went into another program and it worked there. And I'm like, well, if it works there, why doesn't it work over here? But unfortunately, the other program claimed that I didn't know my password. So then I said, okay, how about this? I started typing in other proposed passwords and said, well, you can't use that one because that's the one you just used. And it's like, well, but you said that wasn't the right password. So anyways, I had to come up with a new password. And then it said my mic is working. And again, I'm looking at the screen down below the image and it shows the mic is working, which it showed before. So I don't know. Chip Levan says, we'll blame the wind. Yes, it is windy here right now. Sherry Canary, hi from Southwest Ontario. Happy to hear you now. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Joel Kiger, smoother than yesterday with Rick. Well, yeah, that was not my fault. Even he would admit that. Oh my gosh. Yeah, no, I was on Good Luck America with Rick Gore yesterday. He is the guy who did a channel previously called Think Like a Cop. Really nice guy. I've talked to him before a few times, just never did a show with him, but we did a live stream yesterday together. And I had everything set up and he went to me and he goes, I can't hear you. I can't hear you. And later on, I went back and watched it and my voice is on. I'm going, you can't hear me? You can't hear me? And he had apparently turned down the monitor on his side. So Isaac Johnson, greetings from Yuba City. Fred Corrado says that's more gooder. It is gooder, I hope. Stephen Shaw, all is okay. Donald Nowvi, hey, Steve. Boycat says we could blame the Klingons for this one. Retired Butcher Boy, Steve, you're my favorite celebrity attorney. Well, you know, unfortunately, a lot of the celebrity attorneys the last few years haven't been doing real well. At least not outside of Michigan. FDS says, how'd you like the StreamYard aspect? It was cool, and I can see why it's fun, but the problem I have, and I don't know if this was simply the way he had it set up, but I could not see any comments of anybody who was in the room with us until he posted them. So as a result of that, you know, it was just me and him having a discussion. So, Mr. Wolfie, did I miss this live stream? No, if you're here right now, you ain't missing nothing. Mr. Phil, 1969. Well, glad you got it figured out. Greetings from New Jersey. Mike Geertz, could you run it all through a filter that makes your set a cartoon? I'm pretty sure you could. I'm pretty sure that they have programs now. In fact, you don't even need a green screen anymore, I don't think, but it's better with a green screen, I suspect. But you can get green screens and then drop in anything you want. And I know people do that for Zoom calls. Of course, you might wind up with people thinking you're a cat. Gary B, Steve, how many hours do you spend working on YouTube? It depends on how you define work, but my videos are roughly shot in real time. And so it's not uncommon that I can shoot 2 15-minute videos and be in and out of the studio in 35 minutes, 40 minutes maybe. And then some editing and uploading, but that ain't that complicated. So Kotak Ceases is partly sunny and 286K in Denver, Colorado, which is 55 Fahrenheit. Yeah, it's what did I say here? 43 degrees right now, 43 here, but windy. So I am not a cat, by the way. Gene. Donald Novi says, great clips on qualified immunity. You saved me hours of work on Westlaw. Yeah, although it's not hard to find that stuff. You just Google is your friend. G Vogue checking in from Albuquerque, and G had mentioned, Gary had mentioned in the previous iteration of this live stream, which got canceled. Which, by the way, YouTube wouldn't let me cancel it. That's one of the reasons that we got delayed getting back into the room, because I couldn't cancel the old one. And I didn't want to come back and start the old one where they'll have a 10-minute dead spot at the front end. So 55 Sedell, thank you for the stream, Mr. Lehto. I'm pondering getting a filmmaker's clapboard slate as a forearm tattoo. Do you have any good tattoo stories? No, but I know you're talking about the thing that, the thing they clap on camera. Funny thing is, every video production company I've worked with has always just said, oh, just clap. You don't actually use those. I know in movies they do, because they do so many different takes and stuff. But it's kind of funny. The only one I can think of that's funny is there was actually a guy in Michigan who filed a lawsuit against a tattoo parlor because they had misspelled a word on his arm. And he came in and he said, I want this word tattooed on my arm. And it's unclear, and it's been so long since I've thought about this, whether he had told them how to spell it or if they had just simply spelled it, but spelled it wrong. And it's like, guys, you can't edit this once it goes on, not very easily at least. So you want to check a dictionary maybe. I would think tattoo parlors ought to have dictionaries on the premises, but they misspelled a word, and it was kind of goofy, like Terminator, but with like an N instead of Terminator or something. It was something like that, but it was one that the guy was gonna have to live with forever. People laughing at him. So, Mr. Phil 1969 says, just to let you know, all of my comments will be cut and paste from other live streams. Hey, if you can make it work. And of course, he's referring to the attorneys who filed the cut and paste brief on appeal. That was nothing more than a complaint, which is a lawsuit. And the judges were so unhappy getting that they actually sanctioned them for doing it. So that happens. Mark Doherty, of course, has no regrets. So does High Pockets. Dennis Berman, Dallas can hear you now. Thank you. So, Wild Bill 57 says, took last week off to see my grandson to come back to this. Won't take any more time off until August. Oh. MD Hofste, and I could be mispronouncing that because it's just a series of letters. I don't know what that means. Did you see that the Ford turbine vehicle is rediscovered? Yes. In fact, I read the article. I completed it this morning. I've had a lot of people send that to me. Ford built a turbine-powered truck, a big, monstrous truck called Big Red. They brought it to 1964 World's Fair, which was the same World's Fair that they unveiled the Mustang at, and Chrysler unveiled the Chrysler turbine car at. So, this car right here. And so most people remember this vividly because there's a big, long program where they rolled those cars out. Big Red was a big attraction at the fair, but it didn't get as much publicity later because it kind of fell off the radar. And people were kind of wondering what happened to it. And so the writers tracked it down, spoke to the owner, but the owner said, I'm only going to talk to you if you won't tell anybody who I am or where I have the truck. Apparently does not want the publicity at this time. And it's an interesting story, but it's actually, it makes sense because what happens a lot of times is that car companies would build prototypes, and prototypes could very well go to a museum. I mean, put them in a museum. And for some odd reason, the car companies built so many prototypes, they'd often just take them out and crush them. So, the 55 turbine cars they built, 46 were destroyed. And so the Big Red turbine-powered truck, many people just assumed it got destroyed, and it actually survived due to some really strange little, facts that happened. So, a pretty interesting story. So, DJ Christopher Howard, I love Car Talk. The radio show or just in general? Pretty Butterfly says the Suez Canal. There's that boat lodged sideways in the Suez Canal, and it's become like a fascination for the world. And it's hilarious. And I don't know enough about it. I've not been following it. I've just been seeing the memes on Twitter and Facebook. But I know that, there's a boat like this, and the canal goes like this. And it's a choke point. It's actually causing a massive problem with shipping around the world. So crazy story. Tigerman 99515. Aren't there other turbine cars? There's a whole bunch of different turbine powered vehicles out there. Chrysler built 77 different turbine powered vehicles, including a truck. Not as big as Big Red, but a fairly large truck. Ford built Big Red, and then also a few other vehicles that were turbine powered. And then General Motors built the Firebird series, Firebirds 1, 2, and 3, which were actually quite a while back. But all of the car companies experimented with it. Other car companies did as well. But I wrote a book about the Chrysler projects. I know much, much more about that. And now, of course, we're debating whether it's a boat or a ship. Colloquially, it is a boat. It is a thing that we float on in the water. But they often say, well, if it has smaller boats on it, it must be a ship. So the Titanic is a ship. The lifeboats are boats, that kind of thing. Stephen Shaw says Das Boat, great movie, which of course is the U-boat movie. I've seen it many times, both subtitled in English, or I'm sorry, not sub, but overdubbed in English, and then subtitled in English with the German dialogue, and a wonderful, wonderful movie. So we've talked about that before. 55 Sedell says VinWiki alum Casey Push built a turbine-powered Batmobile that got 4 to 8 miles per gallon. That's pretty good. Although if you took it out and got it to a steady speed and did highway driving, you could probably bring it up a little bit. But Bob Blah Blah says, yeah, the ship is actually a bridge now. Flat tires and ZKR99 both say that boats lean into a turn while a ship rolls away from a turn. I'd never heard that definition before, but since two people were unrelated apparently said that, I'll have to take a look at that. Because I'd simply always heard that it was the size of the ship and whether it had other boats on it. But, what do I know? Because what you're talking about there seems more like the center of gravity. And so it sounds like if I were to make my canoe really top heavy, I could turn it into a ship. Carl's Corner, I'm waiting for my ship to come in. Carl H says, yeah, and don't forget Bodie McBoatface. The question is whether it should have been really Shippy McShipface. Scotty Beam, hello, coming to you from Christopher, Illinois. Not sure where that is. 52 degrees today. Muroff Rumford, did I miss the epilogue to Crazy Town, or have you not made it yet? There is no epilogue to Crazy Town at this moment. Stay tuned. Mark Doherty says they announced that it might be human error. The only question was alcohol a factor? Might be human error. The funny thing about that canal, I'm surprised it took this long for something this dumb to happen. Because I'm looking at that now going, wow, it's such a simple thing to go wrong that can jam this up, but who knows? Scott Arga, hi Steve from Salt Lake. Thank you for checking in, my friend. Stephen Shaw says my kayak is a boat, a ship, and a submarine, depending on how I lean. And whether or not it's displacing water. Fred Stewart says the ship was caught in 40-mile-per-hour winds. I've heard that the wind thing has both been said to be like, yeah, it makes sense. And other people are saying, So I can't imagine it's the first time the wind ever blew over the Suez Canal. But, again, I have not studied this. I admit this. So, what do I know? Mudslinger says, hey, Steve, have you heard about the Lexington, South Carolina sheriff cover-up of an officer having relations with high school students. Look at it. I have not seen that. If you have a link to a story, please email it to me. I'd love to see it. John Parks, would you rather go up against Teresa Brennan or Judge Judy? You mean legally, or can we punch it out? Because I'll tell you right now, if you're saying, Steve, slap on some boxing gloves and get in the ring, Teresa Brennan, any day of the week. Oh, Judge Judy's interesting. I mean, she's making a killing doing what she does. And so it's hard to fault somebody who's that successful at what they do, but I've never really cared for her personally as a personality. I did like Wapner. Judge Wapner, the whole point behind Judge Wapner was he was a nice guy, but he also knew the law, and he could very, very quickly distill stuff into plain English, and he was a great guy. I liked Wapner. Time for Wapner. But not so crazy about some of the other later TV judges. Ray Baker, how about trial by combat? There you go. Eric Hart says it's massive broadside acted as a sail and sent it sideways. Yeah, I understand that, but my point is, there have been other ships that size that have gone through the Suez Canal, and the canal's been there for a long time. It makes you wonder, what flukish wind could really come along and cause that kind of havoc unpredictably. It hasn't happened before. So we'll see. Ronald Knight, hey, Steve, San Antonio says hi. Rational Bushcraft says, I see a pay-per-view match coming. Back when I worked in Flint years and years and years ago, I was doing a morning show. And at the time, I was also taking Taekwondo. I've mentioned that before briefly. And somebody was joking around about another morning show and, whether we should get into some kind of, feud with them. And somebody said, well, what if this guy said such and such about you? I said, well, and then I just say, hey, you want to settle this? Let's just do a couple rounds of full contact kickboxing. And that ended it right there. So Kotaxista, are there locks on the Suez? I don't think so. Now, if you just said, are there locks on the Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan's got locks. But yeah, no, I don't think there are locks on the Suez. But the Fuse Man says none that I know of. Vixen says, did you ever see when someone cursed at Milian in Spanish? No, I did not see that. Mr. Phil says it was being piloted by a Suez harbor captain. And that wouldn't surprise me. And I seem to recall we had a discussion on this a few weeks ago, and I got in a lot of trouble for misusing the phrase harbor captain versus pilot versus something else. All I know is I've been on big boats or ships that were going into or coming out of harbors, and a little boat comes out, and a guy gets on board, and he actually climbs, and he comes up, and he gets on board the ship, and he's the one who maneuvers it up the dock, and then when the boat leaves, I think he also maneuvers it out. And if you ever want to just, enjoy part of the spectacle, you go over to the railing and watch this guy get off his little boat, come up and take control of the big boat, and then get back down onto his little boat and go home. So that guy's got an interesting job, to say the least. But obviously, he's got a lot of responsibility as well. Reinerman says they mentioned the tides. The tides. I hadn't even thought about the tides there. Wonder how substantial they are. Dave Beddoes, a few days ago, a firefighter in Nanaimo lost his garage and restored 72 Chevelle due to arson. Feel really sorry for the guy. So, yeah, so do I. That's a crying shame. It's obviously strange that it was a firefighter, and they think that the cause was arson. But, anything that causes the demise of a 72 Chevelle, it's one of my favorite muscle cars from that era. I've always liked the Chevelles. So it's sad if one got destroyed. Grocer Mike always spots the Ben, no matter where I hide him. Thomas Rogers says you should add a model of the ship to your shelf next to the Coast Guard sign. I actually have the model of the Titanic that's sinking, but right now I'm using it as an anchor point for this sign. So it's kind of like behind there. But if I got one, I'd want to wedge it in wrong because that would make it funnier. Jared Draper, morning. How are you up there? Doing pretty good. I assume that you're a lower latitude or longitude than I'm at. G Keyman 565. Hello, Steve Lehto. Back on the road, I see. Yeah, we had a bit of an issue. Technical issue. All technical issues are my problem, but they're just confusing me. That's all. Sleepy 314 says now is high tide in the Suez. If they don't float right now or the next 2 days, they'll have to wait a month or unload it. Ooh. Can you imagine if they had to unload the whole thing? Tom, hey Steve, what's your song? Such as, is it Desperado or Which A Woman? Seinfeld had the episode where Elaine was dating a guy. Whenever Desperado came on the radio, he'd go, shh, it's my song. And you had to wait while he kind of like just soaked it in. And once the song was over, and Elaine thought, well, why can't we have our song, Or can I have my song? And somehow just never quite worked out. What's my song? My song would probably be Sylvia's Mother by Dr. Hook. I'm not joking. It's one of my favorite songs of all times. 55 said, are there any muscle cars you aren't a fan of? Well, it's just there's some I like more than others, but I enjoy most muscle cars. I go to the Woodward Dream Cruise and it's just like, wall to wall, but there are just some I like more than others. Like, for instance, I'm not as into any of the cars from the 50s. And I know the muscle car era generally is more like, say 64, 65 forward. But, when I go to a car show, don't get me wrong, I think the 57 Bel Air is a beautiful car. But, it's kind of big and it just doesn't do a whole lot for me. So Chris R says, dude, you never shout me out. Give me a shout out. Well, this right here, my friends, is a shout out to Chris R. DCO Entertainment says, you have great hair, Steve. Thank you. I get a lot of grief about my hair. And I'll admit, I don't put as much thought into it as I could. My hair is blonde. That's a natural color. It is not bleached. In the summertime, my hair does get lighter. And it's partly because of the sunshine, but also because my skin gets a little tan. And I've actually had people say, Steve, you got to get rid of that stupid tan, as if I could somehow, spray paint my skin white or something. But right now we're just coming out of the winter time. So my hair, although blonde, is a little bit darker and my skin's a little more pale, but I have been getting out the last few weeks. I've been running and biking in the afternoon. So I've been getting a little more sunshine. So, and I'll get back to that shortly, but thank you. Appreciate that. Ray Baker says my favorite classic car is the Dodge Viper. You have great taste, my friend. I took my Viper out yesterday. It was so beautiful out yesterday that after I got off the air with Rick Gore, I very quickly ate something, jumped in my car because it was sunny out, and did a quick drive around, jumped on the freeway, got about 20 miles, and then jumped off and then took back roads home and filled it up with gas. So I've now run a couple tanks through, so all the winter gas is out. So there you go. Diana Goodrich points out that the logistics of unloading that vessel in the Suez Canal, where it is, ain't going to be that easy. Because what are you going to do with the stuff you take off of it? Are you going to put it on another vessel? So in that case, you got to bring another vessel in. And there's a reason that experts are confounded by this. So, hey, Chris R says, thanks, Steve. LOL. All caps. You got to admire the dedication there in the all caps. Cotaxista, by the way, also says, hey, Chris R. So other people are giving you the shout out. Hans Schmidt says, hello from Washington State. Enjoy your content. Thank you. Well, thank you. I enjoy your comment. Vinny Cantor says, I feel like Chris R., but I'm not that sensitive. That's okay. I'll give you a shout out too. JC Stacks is 70 Torino GT, 429 Cobra Jet, C6 Auto, 1 of 375 built. I will tell you that I admire all of the rarer configured cars. So if somebody says, hey, Steve, what do you think of 70 Torinos? I'm familiar with them. I like them. They're nice cars. But you say, well, the 70 Torino GT, that's cool. I like the high performance versions. Okay, what about a 429 Cobra Jet? Okay, now we're talking cool engine, cool car, and you go, oh, it's 1 of 375 built. Now, that's not like, Van Gogh rare, but it's pretty rare for, but how many of them survived, So that is pretty cool. So I'll stop and look at a car like that for a while. I will admit that I like cars that are restored to original or kept original versus ones that are resto mods because, those aren't quite as interesting to me, but everyone's entitled to their opinion. So Bond James says the Buick Roadmaster was the epitome of 50s cars. I will also tell you that I honestly think that Roadmaster is one of the coolest names ever for a car. The Buick Roadmaster. Just think about that. It's the ultimate. It's the Roadmaster. And think back. I think was that a Harley Earl creation originally? And it's got the big cutouts on the fender that you're not sure, are those supposed to be like intakes, exhausts, like portholes? What are those? But Buick, of course, has got a great connection to Michigans. I've always liked them. Carl's Corner. Have a 57 Bel Air fully restored. Very cool. Yeah. The 57 is a classic. 55, 56, 57 are very cool cars. My brother had a 55 Bel Air for years as his daily driver. It had a 3 on the tree. But it's a different era. I think there's a big shift in design from the 50s to the 60s. Although, quite frankly, you want to talk about cars, let's go back and look at the cars from the 40s. They look like toasters, So, G. Volk says, your hair looks like Harvey Specter on Suits. I have not seen Suits, so I'll have to take your word on that. I've also been told I look vaguely like Johnny Rotten from the Sex Pistols, or John Lydon, and a couple others. Some wrestler guy. I always forget the guy's name, but, Eric Meyer, hey, Steve, loved your bit on VinWiki. It was a great episode. Thank you. I did 3 videos so far on VinWiki. We did one on, traffic tickets. I did one on the winged cars. And then I'm drawing a mental blank on the other one. But the winged car one is doing pretty well. Oh, and the Lemon Law, vehicles owned by my clients. That one's got something like 500,000 views and our 430,000 views. So Matt's Horsemanship says, thanks for going on Rick Gore's channel. It's very interesting and great. Well, thank you. I appreciate it very much. My understanding is that, I did not know this, but he has another channel for horses. And he said, well, on my horse channel, and I thought, I didn't know you had a horse channel, but apparently he does. So Matt's Horsemanship, you probably know about that. So Richard Trakoff, are you familiar with the Finnish camp in Wixom? Yes, I am. I forgot the name of it. I've never been there, but I am a member of the Finnish Center Association in Farmington Hills, not far from there. And there's some crossover there between what the various people do. I know quite a bit about that. So Wild Bill 57. First 2 cars I drove were 3 on the tree. I've only seen 1 in the last 40 years. I haven't seen one in a while. Actually sat in a car that someone was driving like that. And I've mentioned this before. I've never driven one. I've driven 4 speeds, 5 speeds, 6 speeds. I've driven, but they've all been down here. I've driven them in cars, trucks, tow trucks, army trucks. I've never driven a 3 on the tree. I'm assuming it wouldn't be that difficult. You just got to remember to reach up here instead of reaching down here and remember the shift pattern. But, that's it's one of those weird things. Yeah, Clueless Dad says Bobby the Brain Heenan. That's people say I often look like him. Jerry Ormston says, hey, from Spain, Steve, I've noticed watching many of your videos from the last few years that you always look tanned. Is it always sunny in Michigan? Well, I'm not tanned right now, but in the summertime, I run or I bike every afternoon. That's how I try to stay in shape. So, in the summertime, you can run in Michigan or bike in Michigan as late as like 9 o'clock at night safely. So in the summertime, afternoon or evening, run, bike. And even though I might not be out running or biking at high noon, I do get enough sun to where I do get a tan. So, but if it's raining out, I don't do that. I use a Peloton indoors otherwise. So Dick Strong, Steve, stop this now. I'm not sure what that means. I can tell you, Ilya, Steve, are you familiar with Finlandia University in Hancock? How much time have you got? Yes. My grandfather was the dean of Suomi College, which became Finlandia. My father attended Finlandia, as did my mother back when it was called Suomi College. That is where they met. I have friends who teach there right now. I've got a friend who runs the Finnish American Heritage Center. I've got a friend who is the editor of the Finnish American Reporter, published by the Heritage Center, which is on the campus of the university. And there's a bookstore there called Northwind Books. I've done book signings there. I've spoken on the campus before. I've hosted film screenings there. I've taught or I've spoken to classes there. And I've spent a lot of times hanging out there. I know a lot of people there. I've met the president of the university, the current president. Yes, I know quite a bit about Finlandia. It's in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. It's about 8 or 9 hours north of where I live as you drive up. And it's way north. It's way north. And the community it's in, Hancock, has the largest concentration of Finns outside of Finland, anywhere else in the world. And so, for instance, the street signs in Hancock are often in Finnish as well as English. And as you drive down the street, business names will often be in Finnish as well. So, yes, I know quite a bit about it. So there you go. Tom says Finns are pale in the spring. We're also told that we're often pale year-round. Hey, Ad Lupus Umbra says, hey, Steve from New Zealand. Love watching your videos. Good to see the Kiwis checking in. Thank you, my friend. I've got friends in New Zealand. PS1 MHD, what is the Coast Guard nameplate for from a retired Coastie? This was sent in by a viewer, and I'm never been a member of the Coast Guard, but I respect any of the services that people are part of, and he sent it in, and I put it up. So thank you for your service. And people often ask me, when wearing a shirt, they'll say, "Oh, did you go to that school?" Or more often than not, the stuff behind me, I'd say more than half of it was sent in by viewers. It's gifts and stuff. So a lot of it, like the bumper stickers are things that I have a relationship with, but some of them were sent in as gifts. About half the license plates were gifts. And so people send me stuff. And so I try to fit it in. That's not my real license plate, but a gentleman from Virginia with a connection to the USS Cole got that for me and sent it in, and I put it up. So there you go. Ardo Hilton then says, Tom, we are not pale ever. It's all a matter of perspective. It depends on what you're comparing the color to. Do you like salty licorice? No, I don't. I know it's a big thing in Finland. But I don't even like black licorice. I like the soft red licorice that the Australians refer to as eating licorice. And the implication is the other stuff is not for eating. I don't know what it's for, but Pyro Disco Flash says Finns are fierce fighters in the Winter War. Yes, we were. So Leslie Beckwith asks where the Ben is hiding out and must not have caught the fact that Grocer Mike pointed it out quite early on. Leandro Garcia, is that a Hemi? Well, there'd be a Hemi in this vehicle right here, a race Hemi. But just so you know, oh, by the way, speaking of gifts, somebody did send me in a bottle of maple syrup from Virginia. And I did a while back, I love those little bottles, they're just so neat. I did a while back a video where we had been talking on the live streams about maple syrup, and I jokingly said, like, who's got the best stuff? Is it Vermont? Is it Maine? Is it Canada? And somebody sent me in some, and next thing I knew, I had like 7 or 8 people that sent in maple syrup, and I said, I really should do a taste test. And so one day I shot some video of me guzzling the stuff like it was shots at a bar, and I almost got ill. So somebody saw that video and said, hey, Steve, here's some maple syrup from Virginia. Thank you. But it'll be a while before I drink that. I still have a queasy feeling when I think about maple syrup. Nate Davis, greetings from Kalamazoo. Kalamazoo, one of my favorite places on earth. I love to say that name. But Kalamazoo's got a really neat downtown. It really does. I like Kalamazoo a lot. Dixie Champagne says, I want to do the Copper Mine tour, like the very difficult one that requires climbing. There are several copper mine tours in the UP that you can take. One is at the Quincy, which is in Hancock, top of the hill. Doesn't involve any climbing, just a little bit of walking. There's one at the Delaware mine. Again, not a lot of climbing, more walking, but that one you don't see as much because that mine was only active for a brief period of time compared to the Quincy. But then there's a mine over at the west end of the UP that they actually, at one point in time, were running a mountain bike race through. So that would involve some effort with your quads to get through. But I've never been in that mine. I've been in the other ones as well, though. So, Amy X says maple shots are still safer to drink than half the liquors there are. You should have asked me right when I was done with the last shot. Oh my! And what was scary about it was I almost got sick. And I don't want to talk about that too much, but I mean, I started feeling like queasy. And then my blood sugar spiked, and it spiked like somebody hitting a thing at the county fair where it clang, and then it dropped almost as fast. And instead of stopping at the bottom, then it went, it shot through the floor. I mean, it was, I thought I might have injured myself. So, Thanotos Felicitas says Western New York has some good maple syrup. I bet they do. ZKR99, I'm allergic to maple. Daniel Hammett, Steve, if qualified immunity is finished, then can the cops sue the suspect? Well, the cops could do that right now, theoretically. The immunity protects them. It doesn't protect anybody else. So it doesn't happen very often. Nick Barchet says, I've got a gal in Kalamazoo. There was a song. And by the way, I got to look for it. There was a song called I Found My Baby in Bad Axe. I think at one point in time, it may have been on YouTube, but it was a big band song. I Found My Baby in Bad Axe, walking on down the street. I used to have a copy. I'm not sure if I have it anymore. Toxteth O'Grady, did they really used to mine salt? They still do. There are salt mines, for instance, underneath the city of Detroit, which is one of the most ironic things. I wrote a book about Douglas Houghton, who went out in 1837 looking for salt that they could mine, and they found salt springs near the present-day village of Sanford, Michigan, which was at that time several days' travel away from Detroit. Little did they know there was salt, but it was straight down. There was salt directly beneath Detroit. And so there actually are salt mines directly beneath Detroit as of right now. High Pockets says, Steve, I've been in Virginia for 60 years. Did not know we produce maple syrup. Be cautious. Oh, learn something new today. Joel Kiger says, so many cool things in the Upper Peninsula. Not sure a copper mine would be my first choice, even though we bought a summer place up there because my wife did work at a mine in Marquette. Yeah, in Marquette, the mines aren't copper mines. They're more, it depends on the era. But as of right now, like there's the mines that are doing like nickel sulfide and that kind of stuff, mining. But I'll tell you right now that if you're traveling in the Upper Peninsula in the Keweenaw area on a rainy day, for instance, the mines don't care what weather it is. So I can tell you that both the mine tours I took were days I was up there and it was pouring rain. It's like, what can you do on a day when it's pouring rain like this? Go, hey, let's go do the mine tour. So there you go. Sherry Canary, I worked for Windsor Salt for a short time. So was there a salt mine or is there a salt mine on the other side of the river, basically mining the exact same salt deposit? That'd be interesting if it was. Dixie Champagne says, Pekka Rinne is my favorite Finnish goalie. How can you choose? There are so many good ones. Oh, boy. MD Hofsty says, well, I found the song. Is it I Found My Baby in Bad Axe? Good. I'll have to check it out later. Wade Pittenger and the operator said 40 cents more for the next 3 minutes. Please, Mrs. Avery, I've just got to talk to her. Oh, boy. Lieutenant Siver says there's a salt mine underneath the St. Clair River and the city of St. Clair. Yeah, there's large salt deposits. And I remember them when they first discovered the salt. There's a couple different places they were working on it. FDSS asks the two questions that come to mind. One is, what happens if the salt mines collapse? And the second is, are there mole people living in the old mines? The collapse would be a problem because they are underneath areas that are settled, but I think they're down so far that they are reasonably certain it's not going to happen. The mole people living in the old mines, I'm only laughing because I've spoken to people who grew up in the Upper Peninsula in some of the towns that were near mines, and they would often tell little kids the mines were haunted. And I am convinced that they did that because they wanted the kids to stay away from the old mine shafts. And there were stories. There was the Miller, I think her name was Miller, the little Miller girl, who fell down a mine shaft in the early 1960s that had been capped and then abandoned, and water had eroded around the cap, and kids were running around and playing near that, and the kid fell down the mine shaft, and they literally could not get her out. And so they would tell kids, oh yeah, the mines are haunted. They're haunted. And that was how they would do that. So Scott Baker says salt's not good for cars. Oh yeah, understatement of the day. Retired Butcher Boy says, Steve, watch the show Suits, at least the first episode. Yeah, I probably should. Enough people have mentioned it to me. One of these days I will. Ilya says there are mold people living in my fridge. Matawar says they had a mine that they dug through a bottom of a lake. Was a bad day. There was also a cave-in of a mine in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. I believe it was an iron mine, but it's called the Barnes Hecker mine collapse. And they had been tunneling a mine down. They started tunneling out sideways. And at one point, they ran it underneath a lake or a swamp. And they cut it too close and it caved in. And I mean, it was bad. It was bad. So that happens from time to time. Nick Barchet says Mrs. Avery, Sylvia's mother, was written by Shel Silverstein, also wrote A Boy Named Sue. Yes, and also wrote the Irish Rovers Unicorn Song. Shel Silverstein was very well known for his children's books, and brilliant creative guy. And he also wrote songs. And he wrote a bunch of stuff for Dr. Hook. A couple other songs, the Words I Didn't Say, I believe, is a Shel Silverstein song. But the greatest thing of all is that he had 3 number 1 hits for 3 different bands. And most people do not know the songs are connected in any way, shape, or form. But once you think about it, you go, oh, they all kind of make sense that they would be related because they're unusual storytelling, humor, but also they're deeper than you'd think for a typical pop song. So thanks for pointing that out. Bond, James says Shel Silverstein used to draw cartoons. Well, he also illustrated children's books and stuff. And the cover of the Rolling Stone, of course, Dixie Champagne. Where the Sidewalk Ends, says Laura. Also, The Giving Tree, wasn't that Shel? So, Jim Seymour, Goodrich, Ontario, Canada, has a salt mine that runs under Lake Huron. That'll get you thinking when you're working in the mine. Laura, a light in the attic. John says, I heard there are tunnels under the old tank plant, 12 Mile in Van Dyke and Warren, Michigan, that run for several miles. I always wonder about stories like that because you never know. I know that there's the stories about the tunnels underneath like Michigan State University and East Lansing. A lot of the tunnels in the Upper Peninsula from the copper mines do run all over the place. And you always wonder about that. Tom says, I've always wondered what Sylvia was doing or thinking during that time while her mother was handling the old flame. Well, presumably, I don't think Sylvia knew that her mom was talking to him. But in case you don't know, and I've mentioned this before, but it's a true story. Shel Silverstein says that he actually did try to call up his ex-girlfriend at one point in time and found out she was getting married. And so it was based on some level, a true story. So if you don't believe me, look it up. Dixie Champagne says Shel Silverstein also wrote for Playboy. Actually, you know, a lot of good writers did. I actually know a friend of mine who's my age who wrote for Playboy. And I'm like, what? You did what? And he goes, yeah. Because I wrote an article, for instance, on like narco-terrorism. And I go, Playboy ran articles about narco-terrorism? He goes, did you actually read the articles? So, oh, boy. Oh, yeah, Joel Kiger points out that Centralia mine is a crazy story, and it's the coal mine in Pennsylvania, underground, that caught fire and is still burning, or was burning for years. And I'm familiar with that one. I think a lot of people have left town, but not everyone has, or have they all left now? Suffrage GM says there are naked women in the sewer system in South Florida. I saw the headline, didn't actually read the whole story, but I saw the headline and it goes, woman pulled from sewer naked. And then something about how she survived for 3 weeks. And I'm thinking to myself, like, did she have clothes on when she went down there? Why did she go down there? Did it take her 3 weeks to get out, or was she happy down there? I mean, do they have to pull her out, or could they leave her there? You know, maybe if she lives on it for 7 years, she can own the sewer by adverse possession. You know, I don't know. Oh, boy. Mark Hoover says still burning and people still there. Yeah, that's what I thought. I watched so many dumb documentaries on the channels that I don't remember the names of the channels, literally. I mean, I'm flipping around and I catch somebody narrating something and I watch and I flip. And I remembered seeing, I thought it was that one, but I wasn't sure. Yeah, Stuart Thompson. Centralia is still burning. Most people are gone, but still a few people living there. Logan, hello from Southwest Kansas. Have COVID. It sucks. Do not recommend. I know a couple people who got it, and the ones I know survived, but they said they would not recommend it either. I have a brother who, by the way, his birthday is today. Happy birthday. One of my brothers has a birthday today, and he got it. He said it was just like getting, bulldozed. He goes, but I'm fine now, but for a little while there, it was ugly. JJ CEO 40 tried to dig a hole to China once, stopped at a 2-foot depth. Leandro Garcia says, Steve, that Mexican culture teaches kids to fear the Kusei. I'm not sure what that word is, to keep them safe. And that's where a lot of the stories that we tell kids come from. A lot of the fairy tales and fables and so on. If you look at it, it's actually like, teach the kids to stick around the house and not do stupid stuff. Mike Gertz, I'm actually squatting in a sewer, and I've been there for 6.5 years. I'll sell you my rights if you take over the last half year. It's yours. Mr. Builder 2K, good afternoon, Mr. Lehto. You and Rick was good and interesting live. I hope you can do it again. Thank you. Well, thank you for checking in. I appreciate that. Yeah, we did 2.5 hours yesterday. Kotax East, I got my second shot a week from today. I got my first shot Wednesday of this week, so I got to wait a couple more weeks, then I'll get my second shot. Literally, it was like somebody went like that, and I had a little tiny spot that hurt for a little while. No big deal. If I didn't touch it, I forgot about it, and eventually I did. So, hey, we had 500 people in the room there for a split second. It might also depend on which shot you get. I got the Pfizer shot, if that matters. KP says, what's the story of the low-flying owl sign? Beware of low-flying owls. It's a long story, but believe it or not, in Florida, they actually have those signs out in Sanibel Island, I believe it is, because there are owls that nest on or in the ground, burrowing owls. And at night, they become active. And if they're nesting too close to the road, they'll often fly in low like this, and they get hit by cars. So they'll actually have signs near their burrows saying, beware of low-flying owls. And I'd mentioned that once, and a viewer sent that in. So there you go. Leon Majors says that the beginning of the Centralia mine fire was the fact that they were using part of an abandoned mine as the town dump. And then they were setting the dump on fire to get rid of the trash. He says that part worked. And I remember that now. I've heard that before. So it makes you wonder, because a lot of these things are caused by people just doing stupid stuff. And you'd think that somebody in the area would understand mine safety to the point where they'd say, well, you probably shouldn't be burning stuff next to a coal mine. But you never know. There's also the Buffalo Creek disaster. I read a book about that a while back, and that was one where they were digging stuff out of the earth, and they had no place else to put it, so they're dumping it across a river for some reason. And then they started basically building up this big earthen dam that blocked the Buffalo Creek, and it turns out that nobody had done the work on it, and nobody really knew like how safe it was. How strong that structure is, or and so there was apparently some federal department or state department that was supposed to come in once in a while and examine this dam that's being built for no reason other than just dumping this stuff. It was ill-conceived all the way around. And then they had really, really bad rains one spring, and the dam burst. And of course, there was a little village downstream, and it wound up killing quite a few people. And they went back and looked, and they discovered that like the inspections were shoddy, and nobody really knew what they were doing. And it's like, again, why are they dumping it across a river? And they never had any explanation for that. Don't know. So, Jerry C., any interest in formula racing? I believe the 12 Hours of Sebring was this past week. Not really. I'm familiar with it. I watch it from time to time, but I don't find it that exciting. I'm fascinated by the technology of it, but I've not watched a lot of racing on television in a while. I can watch NASCAR for a little while. I can watch. I actually like NHRA. I love drag racing. I think drag racing is cool too. And I like Indy cars, but generally speaking, I watch one Indy car race a year, and that's the Indy 500. So what are you gonna do? Oh boy, Jason Johnson, when the levee breaks. Kurt B., are you a NASCAR fan? Well, I was a NASCAR fan. I jokingly tell people I stopped watching NASCAR in 1973. Restrictor plates are of the devil. So, stock car racing hasn't been stock since about 1973. So, Bob A. Bong. Hey, guys. Hi, guys. Hi, Bob. How you doing? Dixie Champagne says 2 Yoopers walked out of a bar. No, really, it could happen. Yeah, unfortunately, the Upper Peninsula, beautiful area, but employment can be an issue. And so, unfortunately, there is an issue up there with substance abuse and alcoholism. So, but Jared Draper says sprint cars are at Bristol this weekend on dirt. It's interesting. They're talking about bringing back dirt. And I remember reading about when they finally paved the last dirt track that NASCAR had raced on. And you got to remember that, like, when Bobby Isaac won the national championship in 1970, they raced on everything: road course, big course, small course, and dirt. And you had to have all your different, skill sets in there. So Ian Halujak, hi, Steve, finished your book and gave it to mom to read. Which book? I'm going to guess American Murder Houses. That's the book that gets shared the most. But if you tell me that you lent her a copy of my Lemon Law Bible, I guess that could be done. Dick Strong, no jobs. Yeah, it's tough. Unemployment's always a problem in the Upper Peninsula. Jason Johnson, you got to have some skills in the UP or work at a university, because they got Michigan Tech, you got Northern Michigan, you got Finlandia, and you got a bunch of community colleges. But, Michigan Tech and Northern are both huge centers of employment, but obviously it's for certain kinds of jobs. So Kurt B, I love the old NASCAR wing cars. I watched dirt car racing on dirt tracks in New York. Yeah, I talked to some old timers. I interviewed Ned Jarrett. I interviewed David Pearson. I interviewed Buddy Baker. And I interviewed all these guys who came up from when stock car racing, even in NASCAR, was almost like just a hobby to where it became professional with sponsors and teams and stuff. And these guys would routinely race three races a weekend. They'd go race one place on a Friday night. They'd go race another place Saturday, go race another place Sunday, and then go home, rebuild their car, and head out and do it again. And it was quite common that they'd be racing on dirt. And I believe it was David Pearson who told me that very, very early on, he knew Bobby Isaac from the area, coming up together. And I think it was David Pearson said that he and Bobby were in a race at some county fairground someplace. He goes, I don't even remember the name of the race or where it was or, what the winner would get. And he goes that the two of them had the best cars there, and they got out front very, very quickly. And he goes, we were driving side by side on a dirt track with no banks, flat dirt track, like a horse track, flat track, just doing laps side by side, inches apart. And he goes, when the race ended, he goes, I don't even know who won. He goes, we both got out of the car and kind of looked at each other, kind of like, wow. Because the entire time they'd never once bumped or neither of them got ahead. It was that even, but they were that good. And he goes, in later years, people be racing. You don't know who the guy is. The guy just bump you. You bump him back, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, they were side by side, just lap after lap after lap, never once bumping or anything like that. So it's a lot of skill. Youth a Mystic says, hello, Steve. This is my first time catching your live show. I love it. Well, thank you. Thank you. Check in anytime, my friend. We got about 500 people in the room right now, but not everyone's got to say anything, Bond, James says some horses specialize in some kinds of tracks too, like mutters. And I heard his mutter was a mutter. Oh, Kotex Easton heard that too. There you go. Oh, boy. Jason Johnson says Barrett Jackson sold a winged Daytona yesterday, live auction. Any idea what it got? The record for a winged car is just a skosh underneath $1 million. One of them sold at Mecum for $950,000 plus the buyer's premium pushed it to $1 million. David Spade bought it as a low mileage 4-speed Hemi Daytona. The rarest and the most important setup, not the rarest, but the most important combination that you could get there. Winged Daytonas in good condition could get you some money these days. So, Toe Taxi, his father was a mutter. His mother was a mutter. Brianna CC, always tip your food delivery drivers. I purposely over tip these days. I've mentioned before, I support a bunch of local carryout places. I do. I'm going to get carry out this afternoon. And I make a point of tipping because I understand that, things are tough right now. And went out to lunch a week ago and tipped generously. And I'm normally a decent tipper, but I'm making a point right now, like, no. It's we're, as of right now, I might not be this generous next year, but right now you got to be generous if you can. So, Tom, I overtip as well. Kurt B says when you can rip a dirt modified around a small track inches away from each other, it's a skill. Yeah, and that's the thing is I don't know. Don't get me wrong. I understand that somebody who's racing NASCAR today, who started out racing go-karts at 3 and was racing like cars on small tracks at like 15 and then like had a sponsor at 16. I understand that they've got a skill set. I understand that completely. But I wonder what would happen if you take that driver and say, okay, this weekend, you're going to race on a flat dirt track, a road track, and then a super speedway oval. And we're going to expect you to actually do as well on all 3 of them. And that's where I think they would really change. Bobby Isaac, Richard Petty, Buddy Baker, David Pearson, Ned Jarrett, all these old school guys could do all of that. And that's what they did. So Fred Hill, if your car is out of warranty, could it still be a lemon? Not in most states. Most states require that the vehicle be under its manufacturer's warranty with a problem that cannot be fixed. There are often some oddball situations you can get in where if you had a car with a 1-year warranty and the problem occurred at 11 months, they couldn't fix it there and they couldn't fix it, and then it wound up being outside of warranty on the last repair. There's some places where you have an argument on that, but for the most part, vehicles that are out of warranty, you're out of luck. It's designed primarily for, the vehicles that are under warranty that cannot be fixed. Ivan Romanov says, over tipping at my favorite local restaurants gets the amazing service. I will tell you right now that I have actually said to a waiter or a waitress, I've actually said, just to let you know, I tip really, really well. And I've had them laugh and just treat me like normal. And I've also had them treat me really, really well, in which case I tip even better to prove a point. Dixie Champagne, hey, have you been in the Triple Nickel? Was scoping out the restaurant scene up that way. It looked interesting. I've never eaten there, but you're referring to the 555 building. That's what we called it. But I know they call it the Triple Nickel now. But the 555 building is, if you're in Detroit, driving out of town on Woodward Avenue, as it comes into Birmingham, just past 14 Mile Road, or past Lincoln, actually, 14 and a half, the road splits, and Old Woodward goes through downtown Birmingham, and Hunter Avenue goes around, and then it joins back up right before 16 Mile, and it goes up in towards Pontiac. And they built this large building right there in the middle of that split, and the address is 555 Old Woodward Avenue. And so they call it the 555 building. They also call it the Triple Nickel. And there have been restaurants in that building for years. There's a restaurant there called the Old Woodward Grill back in the early 90s. I used to eat there all the time. Very, very good friends with a couple people who worked there. But as with all restaurants, it went out of business, and eventually somebody else came in. So I'm not sure who's there now. Never eaten there now. But if you want to see good restaurants, there's a lot of them in the Detroit area, the Birmingham, Royal Oak area, or even further up, Bloomfield Hills and so on. But there's a lot of good restaurants in the area. So, Bettina 150 or 150 says, "Hey, I'm an Uber Eats driver. Thanks for being a generous tipper." And that's the thing is people who drive, and I'm separating here the restaurant workers who wait on you at a table versus a delivery driver. Most of these delivery drivers are driving their own cars, and so they might be getting paid by the delivery, but they're putting wear and tear on the car. And I feel sorry for the car. So I got to tip them even more because the poor car, needs maintenance, gas, and all that stuff. Ilya says, I don't get the tipping culture at all. Why aren't people just paid a living wage? That's an interesting point. And I know that when you travel, you always got to find out what the tipping rules are. I remember being at the airport, and I attempted to tip a British Airways worker. who looked at me with a look of disdain and disappointment to the point where I actually thought they might not let me fly. He's like, get your dirty money away from me. But it was in America. In America, you tip people at airports. So, it's one of those things that started a long time ago. I don't know who started it or how, but in America, they can pay wait staff below minimum wage on the theory that the customers will make it up. And then, of course, we all know what happens is there's customers who just don't feel like tipping. And so, it's unfortunate, but, I work with it because that's the system we've got. The Fuse Man. Apologies if there's any in here, but local Amazon drivers are horrible here in Western New York. I've had good luck with the Amazon drivers. In fact, I've had good luck with almost everybody. The only issues I've had with delivery is the U.S. Postal Service. So Fred Corrado says 15%, correct? Well, a standard tip is 15%. So they say you got to tip 15%. And then there's all kinds of other questions. For instance, JJ CEO 40, do tipping rules percentages include the tax? Sometimes it might not matter. It might. And then, of course, I can also tell you, I've spoken to people working food service, and they'll tell you that if you are waiting on somebody who doesn't order alcohol, the worry is they're not going to tip much. Number one, because they're going to be sober enough to realize how to do the math correctly. But number two, the bill won't be that high. So that's my concern always is I don't drink. So if I go to a restaurant, I often order iced tea or Diet Coke or something. And I can often see a wave of disappointment go over the face of the waiter or waitress because they're thinking, this guy's not going to tip me. But I will tip him. So, Doug Jones, don't get me started on Amazon. They sent me a picture saying parcel delivered. It was not my house. Actually, you are correct. I'm glad you pointed that out. I did have an issue with Amazon about 6 months ago where they said a package was delivered and they said, here's a photograph of it. And it was my next door neighbor's front door. So I knew where it was because I recognized the front door. Scott Baker, have you tried using Tiro? No, I have not. David Hastings, my Domino's drivers love me. Oh, boy. Bob Bong, can they tax excise tax? I've heard people talking about the taxes and how taxes get applied. And there are situations where they'll add something up that's already got a tax in it and then tax that as well. And, on a small bill, it won't add up to much, but on a big bill, it would, and sales tax on a car, for instance, can become a big, big deal. So again, it's going to vary on the state and municipality. I don't know what the answer to that is, but I get asked that one all the time. Bender Fender says, my first legitimate job was at Panera Bread. They had signs that said, don't tip. Thanks, Panera, for ensuring I couldn't make more than your minimum wage. That's one of those policy decisions a company makes. And they go, hey, you know something? If we say don't tip, then maybe people will be less put off if they come in here. Because some people do actually worry, like, how much do I tip? And if you're like at a place like, where you literally stand here and walk along as your food is assembled and they hand it here, do you tip the person or not? I don't tip the Subway food assembler, and you don't tip the person who trowels the meat like insert into your Taco Bell, do you? And so the question is, at what level does tipping start? And so I there's actually a grocery store near my one of the routes I take between my office and my house, and it's a family run store. And as they bag your stuff, a teenager will come over and go, "Do you want me to take that to your car for you?" And I always think to myself, something, they're hiring kids. This is the greatest thing ever. This is the type of kid. This is the type of job I wish I had as a kid. So I always say sure. And the first time it happened, that's kind of cool. And I go to flip the kid some money because I can't take tips. And I thought, wow. Not only is the kid polite, but he's also got self-control because most kids would be like, sure, stick it here. But, oh boy. Gerald Thompson, late to the party. If you made it, you made it. We don't judge people. Ivan Romanov says Subway here does have a tip jar. Actually, you're right. I just realized that there is a tip jar there. I've always thought the tip jars probably don't get as much traction, but then again, they're usually used in a place like that where it's not quite the same. Betty Boop, I donate my change as a tip at fast food places. Yeah, and that's the thing is you dump change in your pockets or your purse all day long. Bond, James, at Starbucks, they just pour coffee or push a button. Scott Baker, I wasn't allowed to accept tips when I worked the coffee at Borders. They're now out of business. Are we connecting those two events? The fact that they wouldn't let you take a tip put them out of business. Bond, James, they don't allow tipping at Barnes & Noble's Starbucks. They got no change jar or tip jar at the end or any donate your change to charity or anything like that. Jared Draper says, next time I get a sandwich that doesn't fall apart, I'll tip the Subway person. Tom says, just don't do like George. Yeah, don't forget about George when he's over there buying the food for him and his boss, and he put a tip in the tip jar, and the guy didn't see it, so he reached in to take it out. He's going to put it back in, and of course, the guy only saw him removing it, and then bans him from the store. Oh boy. Kotax East, do you tip the wood guy? Well, like a guy bringing firewood or something? If somebody's doing a lot of work, especially if it's dirty, like they're handling stuff and like wood and so on, I would consider it. But if it's his own business, but if he's an employee, yeah, flip him a couple bucks. Yeah, the calzone. I was having a mental blank on that. Nimble Fred, JJ, CEO 40. It's the calzone that George was having with Steinbrenner. Oh, boy. No soup for you. Oh, Robert Hart says March Madness is here in Indianapolis. Yeah, the University of Michigan is playing a big game, I believe, at 5 o'clock Eastern time this evening. I will watch it. So, Tuomas Mäkkinen, greetings from Finland. Your legal advice is mostly useless here, but love the crazy stories. Keep it up. As far as blurbs go, I should take that, put that in quotes on my website and say, Tuomas from Finland says, your legal advice is mostly useless. In this context, though, it's that's funny. Thank you for checking in. I appreciate that, especially the people from Finland. I don't have the Finnish flag out right now. I keep forgetting it's up there. I got to bring it down. But you'll see a bunch of references behind me to things of Finnish heritage. And, of course, my name is what gives it away to most people. And then I assume that the Finns who check in have spotted that this, of course, is also a call out to my Finnish friends because that's a Finnish flag that makes up the windscreen on the Electro Voice RE20 microphone that is on the shirt. So, Willie Harrell says, Spartanburg, South Carolina, hello, right there, also in the heart of NASCAR country. Tom, it's not legal advice. It's not in the sense that we don't have a attorney-client relationship. So Kurt B says, question, would you run your Viper all the way around the track at Daytona at full speed? If given the opportunity, yes. I doubt I'll be given the opportunity. But what I would do is I would need to upgrade the tires. And so I would talk to somebody about getting high speed, balanced, and all that tires that are designed to go that fast and also to take that kind of force. The tires I have on it right now are road tires. And I don't know what they would do at 140 miles an hour, 160 miles an hour. So, but I don't know for a fact I'd wind it up to 180. You have to understand that when Daytona got built, okay, when it got built, it was actually a huge track with huge banks that even the guys who drove at that time thought was crazy because the cars were getting faster. And Bill France just said, well, we'll build the track to accommodate the fastest cars that are coming as opposed to accommodating the cars of today. And Buddy Baker's father went out and looked at the track, and he was a racer. His Buck Baker. Buck Baker looked at Daytona, took one look around, went over to his son and goes, I don't want you driving here. And Buddy Baker goes, why not? And Buck Baker goes, son, the glove box of my car is a gun. Go out there, take it out, and shoot yourself with it. It'll be less painful than racing on Daytona. Something to that effect. I'm paraphrasing. But the point is that he honestly thought that track was just going to kill people because it was going to be encouraging such high speeds with those banks, but it worked out. What Of says, tires generally have a speed rating indicated with a letter. Yeah. Darkness says Z rated is good for 170. Yeah. And JJCEO 40 says Days is under. Tires win races. There's a whole science to it. I know there is. Peter Mandix is and an alignment for track duty. Yeah, actually, I would do a whole bunch of stuff. I mean, obviously, I wouldn't just go, hey, I'm here. Let's. I might take my Viper also to a drag strip this summer. There's a couple in the area, and it might be fun just to see what a knucklehead like me can get through a quarter mile at in the Viper. We'll see. Dick Strong says new tires, show me the money. No, that's the thing. That's expensive. I mean, I got the Viper at 4,000 miles on it, had the original tires. They were 20 years old. 20-year-old original tires. So I had my friend Mark Lieberman, who owns Nostalgic Motoring, right there. I said, Mark, get me a set of tires. And he got me a set of tires. It wasn't crazy expensive, but yeah, it was a little expensive. So, Kurt B, will a Viper do 200 miles per hour? I wouldn't be surprised if one outfitted by Chrysler to race would. I don't know if a stock Viper will do 200, but I've heard of them approaching 180-ish, and that's the kind of speed that would, get your attention, right? Eli and the Wolverine State, take it to Milan. Is Milan still open? I always get confused. I think Milan is the one that Motor City Dragway, right? That's Motor City Raceway? Robert Hart, I'll drag race my 5-speed inline 4 Ranger against your Viper. The question is that inline 4, that's not the one that's got the dual plugs per cylinder, is it? We should bracket race. Okay, so we'll go to the drag strip. You do a quarter mile pass. I'll do a quarter mile pass. And then we'll back up, start over. But this time we'll give you a head start to make up whatever the difference is. So if we do it right, we'll cross the finish line at the exact same time. Michael Pasquale says, hey, Steve, love the show and what you're doing, but can't stay until the end. Just had a big oak tree fall on my shed in the backyard. And I'm in Tennessee. Time to dig out the chainsaw. A chainsaw party, and I'm not invited? I got brothers who got chainsaws, and they play them like they're guitars. And when someone says, hey, can you bring your chainsaw over there? Like, yeah, right now, I'm on my way, fire it up on the drive over. But I hope everybody's okay over there. It's windy where I am, too. So, lied to. Have you ever been to the cruise in Flint? No. The reason is they run it the same day as the Dream Cruise. And they do it on purpose. And I think it's a dumb idea, but they thought, well, some people in Flint won't want to drive down to Detroit. People come to the Dream Cruise from all over the world. Okay. People aren't going to mind driving from Flint. I've met people, last when I went to, the first guy I met was from Traverse City, which is, up here. So eviction law help. Hey man, you're awesome. Thank you. Appreciate that. Kurt B, dual ignition. I seem to recall there was a Ford truck engine that just simply had 2 spark plugs per cylinder. And I thought it was a 4-cylinder, but I could be wrong. Ronald Kramer says, I did 105 on my Harley pulling a trailer. I'm lucky to be alive. You understand doing 105 on a Harley without a trailer. I mean, and this is the thing. I talk about this with people before. I've talked about it, and you can be the safest driver on earth. Number one is other people on the road. And number two, there's stuff on the road. And so, like, I don't know what part of the country you're in, but I've been driving down the road before and had a big deer with a rack of antlers this big stumble out of the ditch and get in front of my vehicle. And, I managed to swerve and avoid it, but a split second in the wrong direction on that one, and I would have wrecked the vehicle. And so, if you're doing 105 on a Harley, and again, don't get me wrong, I'm not criticizing, I'm simply pointing this out. If you were doing 105 on your Harley and let's say a big old possum wanders out directly in your line of travel, do you swerve at 105? Do you run it over and see what happens? What about the possum? So Fred Corrado Jr., I'll bracket race you. What do you got? Wade Pittenger in the movie Roger and Me, a woman from Flint is butchering rabbits with a sign saying rabbits for sale, pets or meat. Pets or, is it pets or food or pets or meat? That was pets or meat. I could be wrong. I've seen that movie many, many times. In fact, I mentioned not too long ago that several people I know are in the movie. William Zander just retracted a message. I was about to read it. Oh. Bob, I used to go to a drag strip at 26 Mile Road, or is it 21, and Grash just north of Mount Clemens. Okay. Fred Hill, did you see your favorite judge was disbarred and will spend 100 days in jail? Are we talking about Brennan out of Brighton? Because if so, I mean that's old news. She got disbarred and she already spent time in jail, unless she's going back for something else. Bettina 150, do you own any classic cars like the ones on your bookcase? Well, I have a Viper, but I don't have a Tucker. Don't have a turbine car, and I don't have a Daytona. I will tell you that a Chrysler turbine car went up for sale about a month ago, and it was widely reported. I had a lot of people say, Steve, a turbine car went up for sale. And I was very happy to find that out, but I actually know who bought it. So it got bought. It's not been publicly announced yet who bought it, but when it does get announced, I will be able to talk a lot more about it. So I knew about the car. I've seen the car before. There's not that many of them left, but I've seen most of them. So it's a fascinating story, and they're fascinating cars. So Tom says the reason why some of us are old, we're lucky, and we never did 100 on a Harley. Randall Nerler, can you ride a motorcycle? I have. I've ridden a couple different bikes, including my brother had a Triumph Bonneville, which I drove or rode. Seems to me if you're at the controls, you're driving, but I guess they often say ride. And then I've also ridden a couple little Honda mini trails that my friends got. So, clueless dad, did Jay Leno want a spare turbine car? No, it's not Jay. Oh, boy. Dave Beddoes, would you have room for the turbine car in your garage? I would make room for it if I needed to. Bender Fender says rental cars are the fastest cars and often the most fun to drive. Todd G, of the three, which would you want because you wrote books about all of them? That's an interesting question. I like all three cars for slightly different reasons. But the turbine, the Daytona, and the Tucker, Daytona and the turbine, to me, I'm fascinated by all three of them. I actually think if price were no object, and you're simply saying, Steve, which car do you actually like the most? It's a tough call between these two here, but I think it's the Daytona. I just think it's a neat idea what they did, and it's cool looking, and it's also related to the car that I had in high school. The Tucker's a really, really cool car. And it's got some very, very neat features, but each of them would be a difficult thing to maintain to different degrees. So Fred Hill, what would a Tucker go for today? If you found one in a barn that was complete and rolled but needed work, probably about $1 million. And if you had one that was immaculate, restored perfectly, and ran, $3 to $4 million. So Tuckers are very expensive. There's 47 of them left in the world, we think. They built 51 of them. So there's 47 of them out there. We know where they all are. And I think one sold at auction for $3 point something million. They don't change hands that often. And so as that goes, when one comes up, it's the question of who wants to talk, who wants one at that moment in time. Kurt B, doesn't Jay Leno already own a turbine car? Yes, that's why somebody said maybe he got another one. So Bob R, a buddy of mine found a 69 Super B with 50,000 miles on it and a blown engine. Unreal. It's immaculate. Cool. Is he going to restore it? I hope. Stephen Shaw, I'd make a good weatherman with pointing without looking. Well, sadly, I'm cheating because, as you know, I'm looking at a screen here, but the problem is it's backwards compared to what I think it is going to be. So I often do this. It's not backwards, but it's So. Oh, boy. Matthew Shostrom, what if a 48th Tucker appeared from a private collection with all original parts and still ran? Well, that's happened. That's happened. Because when the Tucker factory got shut down, there were all kinds of parts laying around, including frames and engines and transmissions and body parts. And those parts got out there. And some people held on to them thinking the replacement parts might be valuable. On the other hand, some people said, hey, let's assemble a Tucker. So some of them that are out there got assembled from those parts. And depends on who you talk to, but 51 is what we count as the original. But you'll often hear them referred to Tucker number 53 or 54 or 55. And those are the ones that were built later from parts, but they were not assembled at the factory. And Scott Baker points out, article in the Daily Mail today about the Ford turbine truck. That's Big Red. We talked about that earlier. So Fortis Atticus, I saw a DeLorean driving in Minnesota once. It looked wider than Doc Brown's. The DeLoreans are small. They are very small cars. I've seen one recently. I've not sat in one, I don't think, but they're small cars, and it's a neat car. It's a neat story. There's a lot of interesting things about the story that are interesting, that make it an interesting story. But the problem is that they're not good cars. The windows are weird. The controls are weird. They're not comfortable. They're not balanced very well. They don't drive very well. I know people who like them a lot, but they're not good cars for what they were. So, and Gary Weisenberger points out DeLoreans are also quite slow. Fred Hill says, did you remember that Richard Petty had his Roadrunner? He so dominated NASCAR that the drivers hated him, and NASCAR banned them. Well, you're referring to his Superbird, but yeah. And Richard Petty, by the way, I've met the guy. He's a great guy. Richard Petty dominated NASCAR. You got to remember, he won 200 races. 200 races in NASCAR. And in 1967, I believe it was, he won 10 races in a row. 10 races in a row. Okay. So, Richard Petty was the king. They called him that for a reason. But in 1970, him and Pete Hamilton, who was his teammate, drove Superbirds. And in 71, basically NASCAR outlawed them, along with the Daytona, and said, hey, we're going to make it go back to this more, normal looking car situation. So, John Parks, I sat in a Lamborghini, almost tight fit. I mentioned before, just got like name dropping, but Ed Bolian, who gave me the speed limit sign here, no 55, he signed it right there, and he's got the Vin Wiki sticker there. We went out to lunch in his Murcielago, and I climbed into that thing, and I joked with him. I said, dude, I never imagined it'd be a car more difficult to get into than my Viper. It's this high off the ground. It's got the doors that go up like this, and there's something weird about how low it is, and the slot you got to fit through to get into the car, and it's just a gymnastic exercise for a 59-year-old man. So, but it was a lot of fun. Bettina 150, have you ever seen the movie Tucker, The Man and the Dream? Yes, I have. Francis Ford Coppola shot it. And Jeff Bridges stars as Preston Tucker. It's good. It's Hollywood. It's got a few things in it that are kind of, polished up for Hollywood. But it's very fairly accurate. They actually met with members of the family and talked to them, in particular, in an attempt to get the feeling of what kind of a guy Preston Tucker was. And so it's a good movie. If you haven't seen it, I would highly recommend it. So JP Boileau says, Steve, I sat in a new Acura NSX and I couldn't close the door. I've always liked those cars, but I've never sat in one before. And it's one of those things. I remember when I had driven a Viper years ago, back in like 1996, I think it was. So it had been a good length of time since I'd actually sat in one. And so when Mark at Nostalgic Motoring called me and said, Steve, your Viper's going to be dropped off today. Want to be here? And so I filmed them backing it off the trailer. They back it into a spot. And I'm walking around it. And Mark goes, Steve, it's your car. You want to drive it? I mean, we still have to do paperwork and stuff. I said, sure. So I get in the car, and my first thought was, wow, this car's gotten smaller since the last time I saw one. Oh, boy. Yeah, G Keyman 565 says the good thing about the DeLorean was the flux capacitor. I think that was a special option, the flux capacitor. Bettina 150, these live chats are fun. How often do you do them? Every Sunday at 1 o'clock Eastern time. So we've been doing this now for about an hour and a half, give or take, the hiccup at the beginning. But almost every Sunday, if I've got some weird conflict, when I went to Atlanta to hang out with Ed Bolian, I missed a day, but I do my best because I think it's better to just set it and go. I've had some people say, Steve, Sundays at 1 aren't good. It conflicts with football or something. Well, sorry. No matter where I put it, it's going to conflict with something. JJ, CEO 40, growing up, my neighbor had a big Chrysler. You could fit a marching band in it. Don't forget how big those cars were, like the Polara. Okay. But also remember how big station wagons were. Now, what's weird about station wagons is that, before minivans, you'd have a station wagon, right? And so there's this big long hood with some insanely large motor in it, and then 4 doors, and then a big thing out back, and then of course the gate that would, some of them opened both ways, either this way or this way, and then the window would go up and down electrically on some of them, and many of them had another seat back there, or that one could fold down, and you could jam tons of stuff, and that's the Americana, right? You pile the whole family, the dog, and a ton of camping equipment in a station wagon, and go drive 12 hours to go camping someplace. Just a nightmare. But the funny thing is how uncomfortable station wagons were for the most part compared to like minivans, but how much stuff you could jam into them. But there were cars coming out of Chrysler that were insane. I mean, all the car companies built big cars back then. Talking about mid 60s type stuff. Or go back and look at a Cadillac. What are the biggest Cadillacs from that era? They weigh like, 19,000 pounds, It's got a bumper that weighs more than your house, that kind of thing. So, Betty Boop, the Lehto-mobile. I always forget that I've talked about some of these things here. 90 knots, hello, able to catch the last minute today. Thank you for checking. We were waiting for you. What can I tell you? The Lehto-mobile, my family had a international station wagon called a travel-all. Go ahead, look it up if you want a good laugh. And so International Harvester, of course, is a tractor company. They make tractors, but they made some cars. They made a Scout. The Scout's a really cool off-road type SUV thing, Bronco-ish, but like, a Scout, International Scout. Really, really cool vehicle. And they built a station wagon for a few years called a travel-all. And it was this monstrosity. It looked like an ambulance. Family had two of them. We had a white one. There's like a 62 or a 63. And then my dad traded that in and got a copper-colored 60. I think it was a 68. And it was a monstrosity. It was it was taller than the station wagon. It looked like I said, like an ambulance or a panel van, but it had windows down the side and the back, and it had the thing with the three seats. And you could remove the third row seat and use it for storage. And so the family would go on vacation. And remember, it's 2 parents and 6 kids. So you got, parents up front, and then you got room for 2 people here, and you got 4 more kids. And so you wind up jamming kids in there. And then, of course, if we brought the cat. And I remember somewhere when I was in school, somebody asking me about what type of car that is your family drives. It was like a circus wagon. And I made the mistake of letting somebody know that one of my brother's friends had nicknamed it the Lehto-mobile, and that became the Lehto-mobile. Now, Gary Weissenberger says the travel-all was nice and square. The last ones were. Go older. Go 68, 67. Yeah, Betty Boop and Fortis Atticus both said 6 boys, 6 kids. Yeah. I'm number 6, my friends. There you go. Kurt B says, I'm one of the 5 kids. Oh, there we go. Kotex East had a 65 Chrysler 300 with a 440. Total gas guzzler. Gas gauge didn't work and no odometer. That's a nightmare. Because I know that I had at one point in a car that had a broken gas gauge, but it had an odometer. And so I knew roughly how far I could get in a tank of gas. And so I would always err on the side of, I've driven 100 miles and I can drop in this much gas, that kind of thing. One Ugly Man says a travel-all looks like a Suburban. Kind of, but like I said, go to the earlier ones. Go to the early 60s. Early 60s. They are hideous looking. They're hideous looking. Jim Bergen, they're looking for a driver for the Oscar Mayer Wienermobile. Just saying, it'd be fun to watch it live while you drive around. That's a fascinating job. Apparently, that's a full-time job. They'll hire you and say you can drive this thing for and we'll give you a stipend and set you up place, but you drive it around, take it to events, and just it's a rolling billboard. Oh boy. G Vogue, the cat probably had the best seat. Well, the funny thing is that the cat, we'd bring a cage because we were concerned that as we were getting in and out of the car, if the cat got out of the car at like a rest stop, the cat could disappear. So we'd have a cage to hold him in for things like that. Once we were driving, we'd let him out. And he would do that where he'd climb around and he'd disappear. And then before we're going to come to a stop, my dad would go, okay, where's Tommy? And, all the kids are looking, trying to figure out where the cat is because he's wedged himself someplace. Cats are good at doing that. So G Keyman 565, one of 6 kids. There you go. Kotex East, wow, Delta 88. I also love the names like Delta 88. Like Delta is a cool word, but 88 what? Or did it have a meaning, or is it like 442? We've discussed that before. John Parks, early VWs had 2 tanks and no gas gauge. So would that be where you'd use one and then when you ran out, you flip the other one, and that'd be like your warning to let you know that you're halfway out of gas? Fupa74, Saginaw, Michigan, in the house. Thank you for checking in, my friend. Nick Barr chases my dog lawyer would chase the Oscar Mayer Wienermobile. It's better than chasing ambulances, I guess. Gerald Thompson worked on a DeLorean window, had to wrap my arms in shop towels. I used to say Wilkinson's sword did the stainless steel. That was one of the things about stainless steel on a DeLorean. It looked great, but what are you going to do if it gets damaged? And so there's a whole issue with that, but also just the problems of dealing with it in the first place. Fred Hill, is Ford still having problems with their double clutch transmissions? Well, I think the way they're dealing with it is they're hoping that they disappear because there's a 3 or 4 year time period where they're putting the things out. They hope to have it fixed. They never really got one. And so they wound up basically just, settling a couple class action lawsuits. And it's sad. I still get phone calls where someone will call me and say, I just bought one of these cars and the trans is messed up. And I'm like, where have you been that you didn't know that? So Ilias is my old family cat just moved in one day without asking anyone. She hated people and lived to be 24 years old. Wow. That is old for a cat. So just showed up one day. Lilith Calbridge, do any of your brothers watch your show? I don't think so. I don't think so. In fact, I'm 99% certain that at least 4 of them don't even know I do anything on YouTube. Gordon 861, older bikes just had a reserve in the same tank. Yeah, I've heard of that before. And I've also heard of some airplanes, obviously, that have a reserve because you don't want to run out of fuel up there. I mean, I understand there's ways to get down, but Kurt B, does the Viper have a huge gas tank? No, I think it's like 15, 16 gallons. And there's something about the filler neck where it doesn't, I don't ever want to overfill it because where the gas gauge is back here, basically on the B pillar coming down from the roof. And so I don't want to spill gas back there. But I just watch the gas gauge. It takes premium, so it's an expensive proposition. Richard R. checking in, another good show. Well, thank you for my friend for checking when you did. So Betty Boop, gotta go, Steve. Thanks for the reboot and live chat. Have a great day. Great day. Thank you, friend. Willie Harol says my bird is 32 years old. That's the thing about those animals that live a long time. We know roughly what the mileage expected is on a dog or a cat or a guinea pig, and people get birds and it's like, yeah, the bird could outlive you, or a tortoise. Don't know about pet tortoises, but Stephen Shaw, thanks, Steve. Time to head out. Peter Pineda, hey, Lehto, what made you become a lawyer? Hey, Lehto. Reminds me of elementary school. Hey, Lehto. I've always found the law fascinating, but I also enjoy research and writing. My undergraduate degree is in history. And there's a lot of overlap in doing legal research and doing historical research. And it just seemed like a natural progression. And I did not know specifically I was going to get into consumer protection when I was thinking about going to law school. But it did pretty much seem obvious because of the fact that I've always enjoyed the idea about consumers getting what they've got coming to them. I love watching 60 Minutes when they bust some bad company or something like that. So, when the idea of consumer protection presented itself to me, it made sense to go into that field. But I wanted to be a lawyer even before I knew I was going to do that specifically. But I enjoy the idea of it. Like I said, it's a lot like historical research. So. Blah, blah, blah. 88 and the Delta 88. The first number signified the chassis platform. The second number signified how many cylinders. 8 cylinders on a number 8 platform. Oh, boy. Jim Bergen, 1928 Hupmobile. Does anyone know where you would see it and daily? Is it in a trademark or something? Yeah, Doug Jones, the joke is the Viper passes everything but the gas station. Ilya says the cat just moved in, demanded to be fed, and kept coming back, but was never really social. We called her the found cat. So was she a kitten, or was she actually a full-grown cat? Because then she may have been even older, right? Retired butcher boy got to go. Hey, never apologize for having to leave. We've all got to leave sometime. JJ CEO 40. I hear a lot of radio commercials peddling law services to get out of timeshares. Do you think they have much success? I don't know if they do or not, but the fact that there's an entire practice of law devoted to getting people out of timeshares lets you know what timeshares are all about. You probably shouldn't get involved in one. So David Person's Place's average lifespan of a full-grown large parrot or macaw, etc., about 50 to 60 years. Wow. And that's a commitment. You know, I know people out there who get fascinated with a particular, and I'm going to get one of these, and they get it thinking like if it doesn't work out, I can get rid of it. Cat, dog, whatever animal, rabbit, chicken, you know, but it's not fair to the animal, you know. And so if you're going to get a bird that's going to live 50 years, that's a commitment that you better think about. Make sure that you're up for it. Rick Hill, thanks, Steve, for another great show. Thank you, my friend. Ivan Romanoff, got to go. Thanks, Mr. Lehto. Thank you. John Peterson, I wonder if you can get wings for a Viper. Are you talking about just the big old wing on the back? They make wings for it. They raced them in GT type racing, and they've got wings that are designed for it. I just don't like the way they look on that year. But there's later ones like the ACR Viper that's actually got like a front splitter and a back wing that match, and they look really cool and gives you more stuff you can damage when you're in traffic. Don't mind me. Does the same apply to tree law? Should we avoid? I never heard of tree law. Is there actually a field of people who are advertising for tree law? Bettina 150. Do you have any sisters? No. Where do you figure in the birth order? I was the 6th of 6. Oh boy. Dick Strong. Good night, bro. Good night, my friend. Wild Bill 57, 69 Chevy Caprice. Never met a gas station didn't like. 327 with a 2-speed transmission. 5,000 pounds of recyclable metal. Yeah, I think it didn't Buick, or was it Pontiac, or did they all? Maybe all of them did. But a 2-speed. I remember at one point jokingly calling it a slush box transmission. But yeah, there was some dubious stuff being built back then. But there was some stuff that's very, very heavy as well. Yeah, Jim Bergen. There we go. 1928 Hupmobiles in the back of the $10 bill parked out in front of a building. Right. That. Thank you for reminding me. That's an interesting little factoid. So. Blah, blah, blah. I hate it when a guy gets a large dog and lives in an apartment. That's, you know, it's a tough call, like how large a dog, how small of an apartment. But I always do feel sorry for dogs. You know, I watch Frasier, okay? The TV show Frasier is in reruns on MeTV. And they live supposedly at the top of a skyscraper. I know it's fiction. But they've got a dog living in an apartment on like the 18th floor of a building in Seattle. And, you know, they take the dog out to the park from time to time. And does the dog really enjoy that as much as the dog might, you know, enjoy living on a farm or something? I don't know. So. Kurt B., I will never stop watching your videos. You are awesome. All caps. Thank you very much. Gary Weissenberger, Michigan Auto Law. I believe that is the law firm's URL of a friend of mine named Steve Gersten from a law firm called Gersten and Colton now. And if that is, Steve's a very good friend of mine. He's a great guy. He and his law firm are among the best in the state of Michigan and probably in America when it comes to auto negligence law. And when people call me and say, Steve, I've been in a car accident, a friend of mine is in a car accident, who should I call? I say, call Steve Gersten at Gersten and Colton now. He's good. He's friendly. He's smart. He's aggressive. And the reason I say friendly is you can call him and talk to him on the phone. And I've had people tell me before that they said, well, I got a phone number. of an attorney, and I can't get him. I got to talk to his assistant, double secret secretary before I can. No. Call Steve Gersten up and say, I'm a friend of Steve Lehto's. He told me to call you. He'll get on the phone to talk to you. He's a good guy, but he's also really, really good. He gets results. And so if that's who it is, I hope it's going to spend 10 minutes talking about the guy. But he's a really, really good guy. So Fred Hill says, unreal back in the old days, people had 12-cylinder cars that had less horsepower than the earlier V8s. What's always funny is you go back. I saw I think it was a History Channel documentary about the early days of just industrial America. They're talking about Henry Ford and how many horsepower his first few cars had, or how many horsepower the Wright Flyer had. And you're like, what? How'd that thing get off the ground? So Bond, James says, even an average backyard is probably too small for big dogs. Yeah. So G-Voked, dogs only know love. Well, that's, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying people shouldn't have dogs, but you should think about these things. And, I've heard of people who got dogs that were wildly inappropriate for the situation. They get a dog that's not good with kids, and they've got a bunch of kids. They get a dog that's not good for city living, and they live in an apartment. And so when you're doing your research on dogs, if you don't know, do research on what these dogs' personalities are, where they flourish, what they enjoy the most, because there are some dogs that enjoy certain types of situations better than others. Kurt B, is that in Michigan? If you're referring to my friend Steve Gersten, yes. Steve Gersten and Colt now. And I've known him longer than I've been an attorney. I met him before either of us was an attorney. I've known him for years. And he is in Michigan. His law firm, I believe, is in Southfield. So Chris Beach, who autographed the cannonball sign behind you? No, it was not Brock Yates. It was Ed Bolian. And Ed Bolian's got the right to do that because Ed Bolian at one point in time did have the cannonball run record for a few years. He wrote a book about it, and he gave me the sign after I visited him in Atlanta. Bob Blah Blah says, the only good dog is a lawyer dog. I would put a little asterisk next to that and say that any dog that's not a good dog could hire a lawyer dog and be made and deemed a good dog. It just depends on how good your lawyer dog is. Oh. Fortis Atticus says, dogs require care and commitment. I've seen too many discarded dogs at the Humane Society because people were too dumb to realize it was not the right dog for the situation. And my brother's got a dachshund, and he's had several dachshunds, and he's gotten several of them from the Humane Society. And people get dachshunds because they're cute. They're fascinating dogs. And when one's passed away, he'll go to the Humane Society and say, do you have any dachshunds? And they always go, no, we don't. They're very, very, desirable dogs. And he'll always say, well, here's the deal. And he explains his history of dachshunds. He goes, here, put me on the list. And people get them and just decide that they can't take them for whatever reason, or, and they bring them back. They bring them back. And so one of my brother's dachshunds, I think, lived to be like 16 or 17 years old. And he's not even really sure because he got the dog after somebody else had the dog and then decided that they didn't want it anymore. And it's like, you don't make those kinds of flippant decisions about cats or dogs. So, and Robert Lee says, if you get a working dog, they need a lot of exercise. And you're preaching to the choir, my friend. I had two Shelties, Shetland sheepdogs, and they didn't have sheep to herd. So we had to go outside and run around a lot to burn off the energy. So Jim Bergen says, which one of your two dogs was the smart one? They had different personalities. It's not that one was smarter than the other, but they spoke differently. They barked at different things. And fascinating, and I'm not making this up. You can look this up. It's true. Shelties are unusual among dogs because they will occasionally look at things in the sky and bark at airplanes, birds, and even the moon. And when I got Milo first and Wolfie shortly thereafter. When I first got Milo, I remember him going outside and looking up. And I've been around dogs before that don't care about the sky. They look at people, they look at animals. They tended to look around down here. And I remember Milo going outside and going, and he's looking at the moon. And he starts barking at it. And I'm like, what? Fortis, a Shetland sheepdog is kind of like Lassie. Lassie was a collie, but imagine a half-size collie. They're not related in that direct of a sense, but they look a lot like that. So, and then an airplane would fly overhead. Milo and Wolfie both bark at it. And there are things they didn't bark at, but they'd bark at stuff in the sky. And then Wolfie would bark at buses. Milo didn't care. But then again, there was things on TV that Milo would bark at, and Wolfie didn't care. Wolfie's like, I don't watch TV. And they'd be in the same room. Wolfie didn't like fires. I had a fireplace. I'd light a fire and Wolfie would disappear. And so, very, very different personalities. So there you go. But anyways, I'm going to wrap it up now. We've been here for almost 2 hours. I felt guilty about how it started. So we're going to end it now. But I will talk to you again. Same time, same place as always, Sunday, 1 o'clock Eastern time, give or take, depending on technical nuances. 2 videos a day. Until then, and I'll see you then. Bye-bye.